I'm Maya Rodriguez, 28, and the morning I woke up speaking Japanese, as if I'd lived in Tokyo all my life, I knew nothing would ever be the same. It began with a whisper, words I didn't understand slipping from my lips in a melody I couldn't recognize. I sat bolt upright in bed, heart hammering, as the sunlight through my blinds painted stripes across my sheets. My mouth felt heavy, my tongue thick. I tried to call out my roommate's name in English but found myself mouthing, Ohayo gozaimasu instead. Good morning. Panic surged. I scrambled for my phone, hands trembling, and dialed my best friend, Emma. When she answered, bleary with sleep, I stammered in Japanese, desperately hoping she'd understand. She paused, blinked, and said, Maya. Are you okay? In perfect, puzzled English. I hung up and listened to my own breathing. English words floated just out of reach in my mind. I closed my eyes, willed myself to speak, and tried again. My name is Maya Rodriguez. I forced through guttural sounds, but the syllables came out wrong, halting. I leapt from the bed, nearly tripping over the corner of the rug, and rushed into my bathroom. Flicking on the light, I stared at my reflection, brown eyes wide, dark hair tangled, and mouthed, Maya, in every English vowel I knew. The bathroom mirror didn't answer. The voice in my head whispered Japanese phrases for basic things. Water, mirror, towel. It was wrong. I'd never taken a Japanese class beyond konnichiwa in college. My first thought was stroke. I called 911, pediatric disaster my mind. The operator sent an ambulance. 2 EMTs arrived in minutes. They ran tests, checking my vitals, scanning my speech patterns. All my neuroscience readings looked normal. One paramedic asked me to repeat simple English sentences. I couldn't. He frowned, leaned in and asked in soft English, Can you say, my name is Maya Rodriguez, I am 28? I tried, and what came out was fluent Japanese. Obax redax 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 rekaisest. Then he placed a gentle hand on my shoulder. We'll get you to a hospital, he said. In the emergency room, the neurologist ordered an MRI, EEG, blood work. They admitted me for observation. Nurses kept asking me to repeat basic English. Hello, thank you, I'm fine. But each time, I answered someone else's language. I tried to write in English on a pad they handed me, but my handwriting morphed into kanji, and kana strokes I'd never practiced. My panic rose until I could barely breathe. I realized that no one would believe this if I didn't prove it. Testing began, flashcards of English words, voices speaking random sentences in English and Spanish. I heard them but couldn't respond. Yet when recordings of Japanese were played, I understood every word perfectly. The doctor, Dr. Lee, looked at me with a mix of scientific curiosity and pity. We'll run more tests and consult neurolinguistics, she promised. But by the time she left the room, I felt more alone than ever. That night, I lay in the hospital bed, the lights of unfamiliar machines blinking in soft constellations around me. My dreams were vivid fragments of Japan. Temple bells, cherry blossoms, voices calling me Maya-san. I knew none of these scenes from memory. Yet I felt an emotional tie, a belonging that defied time. When I woke, the first word I spoke was arigato, thank you. The nurse gave me toast and water, but I wondered if even food names had changed in my mind. Bread became pan, rice became gohan, water became su. All labels were placed as though overwritten. Emma arrived early the next morning, her eyes red from worry. I greeted her in Japanese. She stared, then whispered English. What is happening to you? I tried to say, I don't know in English, but instead slipped into an apology in Japanese. She enveloped me in a hug, tears in her eyes, and spoke softly. We'll figure this out. Over the next 2 days, the team ran every conceivable test, genetic panels, spinal taps, viral cultures, but all returned normal. No stroke, no tumor, no infection. It was as if my brain had rewired itself overnight. Dr. Lee called it acute bihemispheric language remapping, but admitted it was unprecedented. The hospital's ethics board recommended I seek psychological evaluation. Could it be dissociative identity or extreme stress? The stress of a failing relationship? I remembered my breakup the week before, how I'd lain awake worrying about rent, career, future. But could anxiety trigger such radical language shifts? Deep down, I knew this wasn't psychiatric. The truth felt older, deeper. On day 3, I convinced them to let me return home under observation. I signed disclaimers and promised weekly check-ins. Back in my apartment, my roommates gawked as I unlocked the door with a cheerful "Tadaima, I'm home." We sat in the living room, and I showed them a single page from my grandmother's old diary, hastily grabbed from a box in my childhood bedroom. It was dated 1912 and written in what I thought was English cursive. Yet where I once read "Dear Diary," now I saw characters I recognized from my morning utterances. I looked at them, breath caught. My grandmother had written in Japanese nearly a century ago. My mother was an American-born art historian with a passion for Japanese woodblock prints. She studied in Kyoto in her 20s, fell in love with the language and a local scholar, and returned to the States without ever speaking of that chapter. My grandmother had hidden her diaries, leaving behind only that single volume. Now I realized I had inherited more than DNA. I had inherited a secret lineage tied to another land. My mother had passed away when I was young. The diary was the only tangible proof of her hidden life. That night, I pored over every line of the diary, translating with my new fluency. My grandmother described meeting a spirit in the attic of her childhood home in Kyoto, a spirit that spoke through the dust and shadows. She documented candles, mirrors, and whispered names. Eerily similar to the rituals I had later performed in the attic of my own grandmother's house in America, the parallels were impossible. I felt a shiver as I realized this language shift wasn't a stroke, it was a calling. The diary's final entry warned, should the bloodline awaken her voice again, the shadows will demand their due. My grandmother wrote of binding the spirit with a wooden plaque and an iron key, both of which she hid in the attic. My pulse jolted. I remembered the old chest in my grandmother's house back in Ohio, the one no one dared open. Suddenly, every late-night whisper, every chilling attic creak from childhood made horrifying sense. I had walked into the same ritual loop she once broke, and the spirit had awakened in me. Determined to reclaim my voice and end the curse, I booked a flight to Ohio. Emma offered to come with me. "This is family," she said, touching my hand. "We'll finish what she started." I nodded, heart pounding. I packed the diary, my grandmother's iron key, and my hospital discharge papers, proof of my new condition. My roommate watched me with wide eyes as I spoke softly in Japanese. "Let's go home." When the plane lifted off, I closed my eyes and felt the language swirl inside me. No longer frightening, but part of my heritage. The journey ahead would take me back through dust, trunks, and whispered symbols in chests that shouldn't be opened. But I would speak the language of my ancestors, face the shadows, and finally bring peace to the spirit that bound me across generations. I carried my grandmother's diary and iron key up the narrow staircase to her childhood attic before dawn, the house still glowing with sleep's last embers. The key felt heavy in my hand, its metal surface worn smooth by years of hidden palms. I pushed open the hatch and climbed into the rafters, my flashlight beam dancing over trunks and dusty trunks until it fell on the chest. Heart pounding, I knelt before it and inserted the key into the ancient lock. It turned with a groan as if reluctant to wake, and the lid creaked open to reveal the book I'd read in translation and, beneath it, a small wooden plaque engraved with the same curling symbols. The attic air was cold and still, as if it had held its breath for a century. I set the plaque on the floor beside the chest and lifted the book, candle smoke from my lantern curling around its cracked spine. I recalled the diary's final instructions. Perform the binding ritual in reverse. Speak the apology at the break of dawn, and burn the wooden plaque in candlelight. I arranged the candles in a circle, each wick trimmed to the same length, and placed the plaque in the center. With trembling fingers, I opened the book to the page marked with my grandmother's spidery handwriting. The apology, written in a mix of English and archaic Japanese, read, "I honor your life. I release your sorrow. I reclaim my voice." I took a deep breath and spoke the words aloud, first in English, then in carefully pronounced Japanese, my voice echoing off the rafters. The candles flared, their flames stretching toward the ceiling. A wind swept through the attic, though every window was sealed shut. I watched in awe as the wooden plaque caught fire, its edges glowing red before the flames consumed it. The smoke spiraled upward, carrying away centuries of grief. For a heartbeat, the attic was silent, then a soft sigh drifted through the beams. A release. I closed the book and stepped back as the last embers died. The sense of ancient tension lifted, leaving the attic feeling lighter than air. My flashlight's beam landed on the patch ceiling where, as a child, I'd scraped my knees exploring. Memories flooded me. My grandmother warning me about the chest, the way she'd hush me when I asked questions I wasn't meant to ask. Now I understood her caution. She'd protected our family from forces she barely controlled. But when I tried to speak in English, my first words still came out haltingly in Japanese. I blinked in frustration and tried again. My name is Maya Rodriguez. English arrived in jagged bursts. My name is Maya Rodriguez. Relief washed over me. The ritual had begun reversing the shift. I tested simple phrases. Good morning, water, please. Thank you. English returned more smoothly with each attempt. My heart soared, but I knew this was only the first reversal. As sunlight seeped through a crack in the attic window, I packed the book and the metal mirror shard I'd saved in the locket. The shrine of candles and ashes remained as proof. Descending the stairs, I felt lighter, but a tremor ran through me. If this ritual freed my voice, what of the spirit I'd bound? Had it moved on, or was it awakened further? I drove through the quiet Ohio dawn back to my apartment, replaying the ritual in my mind. My phone buzzed with test results sent by Dr. Lee's team. My English comprehension scores were 30% higher than yesterday. My Japanese comprehension remained intact. My brain truly was bilingual once more, a neurological miracle. That evening, I called Emma and spoke entirely in fluent English for the first time in days. Joy lifted her voice. You're back, I laughed, feeling whole for the first time in a week. But as I set the receiver down, my mother's last message fluttered on my answering machine. Maya, I'm sorry I never told you about this part of our family. You must finish what started. Go to Kyoto? The tape clicked silent. Kyoto! My mother's hidden life, the origin of the chest's magic, beckoned. Over the next 48 hours, I booked a flight to Japan. I reunited with Dr. Lee via video call to explain my plan. She warned of cultural and medical complexities but agreed to consult remotely. Emma insisted on coming with me. We'll face Kyoto together, she said, her resolve steady. Packing my grandmother's diary alongside my own notebooks, I felt the weight and wonder of two worlds converging. On the evening of departure, I stood at the gate, passport in hand, English and Japanese swirling in my mind like twin rivers. I closed my eyes and recalled the attic's hush, the flames of the plaque, the first clear English syllables that emerged on my lips. I whispered the apology once more. I honor your life, I release your sorrow, I reclaim my voice. This time, I added, and I will uncover the truth behind our family's secret. The flight to Tokyo would take nearly 12 hours. I drifted between sleep and wakefulness, dreaming of temple bells and cherry blossoms. I knew that part 2 of my journey, returning to the source of the ritual, would test every ounce of courage I possessed. But as the plane descended through the scarlet hues of dawn, I felt ready at last to face the final chapter of my family's hidden story. I stepped off the train at Gion-Shige Station just before dawn, the air cool with morning mist and the soft glow of lanterns guiding my way through Kyoto's winding streets. Emma walked beside me, her hand tight around mine. I still felt the language swirl inside me. Each step forward in Japanese felt natural, every breath a reminder of the journey I'd inherited. Our first stop was the old house where my mother had lived as a student. It stood tucked between a noodle shop and a silent temple gate, its paper screens yellowed with age. The landlord, a kindly old woman named Mrs. Sato, remembered my mother. "My san?" she called her, and handed me a faded photograph of my mother in her 20s, standing on those very steps, hair loose and eyes full of wonder. I pressed the photo to my heart, then unlocked the front door with a key I'd found taped to the back of the diary's final pages. Inside, dust lay thick on the tatami mats, and the air smelled faintly of incense. In the back room, a small altar stood beneath a lattice window. On it, a wooden box carved with the same symbols as my grandmother's chest beckoned. My heart thundered as I knelt before it, recalling the attic ritual and the apology that had begun my healing. With reverent hands, I opened the box. Inside lay a handful of withered sakura petals, a silver hairpin, and a letter in my mother's handwriting. I read her words aloud, first in Japanese, then in English for Emma's sake. To my daughter, may you find the truth in both our voices. The shadows we cannot speak of are only shadows until we bring them into light. Beneath her letter lay the final piece of the puzzle, an uncut jade pendant carved into the likeness of a dancing spirit. Lightning flickered in my memory as I placed the jade on the altar, arranging 3 black candles around it. Emma held the diary open for me, her face solemn in the candlelight. Following the instructions, I traced the symbol from the attic ritual onto the floor with chalk. Then, voice steady, I spoke the binding words backward, weaving Japanese and English together until the candles flared, casting 3 dancing shadows on the walls. The pendant glowed green, and I felt a presence stir behind me. I turned slowly to see a translucent figure emerge. Beneath her hood, eyes like liquid moonlight. She hovered above the altar, sorrow etched into every curve of her ghostly form. I took a breath and recited the final vow from my grandmother's diary. By blood and memory, I free you from this place. May your spirit find the dawn you were denied. The air hummed, the pendant dimmed, and the figure inkle stirred her head once, a silent thank you. A breeze swept through the room, scattering the petals like snowflakes, and the pendant slipped from my fingers to rest silently on the altar. The candles winked out, and the shadows receded into the corners. I let out a shuddering exhale, feeling the weight of centuries lift from my chest. Emma pressed her hand to my back as tears pricked my eyes. We left the house as dawn broke fully over the city. Outside, cherry blossoms drifted down like pink snow. I slipped the jade pendant into my pocket and folded the letter gently into the diary. Emma and I walked to the river, tossing petals into the flowing water, our own small ritual of release and remembrance. Later, at a quiet tea house overlooking the Kamo River, I spoke entirely in English without hesitation for the first time since the attic. "It's over," I said, letting the words settle in the air between us. Emma reached across the low table and squeezed my hand. "Welcome back," she whispered. In the weeks that followed, my speech tests confirmed a full restoration. English and Japanese balanced in my mind like 2 rivers meeting. Dr. Lee's amazement over video call was palpable as she reviewed the data. "You've done what science can't explain," she said. "You honored your family's history and unlocked a truth no lab could replicate." Back home in Ohio, the attic door remains locked, the key hidden beneath a floorboard in my grandmother's house. I keep the jade pendant on my desk, a reminder of the bond between past and present. I record the story in a journal. 24 pages of typed notes interwoven with translations of my grandmother's diary and my mother's letter, so that no future descendant will face the same shadows alone. Now, when I wake each morning, I choose my first words carefully. Not out of fear, but out of gratitude. The world greets me in English and Japanese, both voices echoing with the love of generations. And whenever I pass a mirror, I smile at the reflection that bears my grandmother's eyes, my mother's spirit, and my own hard-won courage. I am Maya Rodriguez, 28. I reclaimed my voice, laid a vengeful spirit to rest, and uncovered the secret hidden in my grandmother's attic. And I know that some family curses are only invitations to remember who we truly are.